Yeah, thanks, Tony. So the presentation that I'll be giving today is around the mahi that we're doing up here in the wider Whanganui Roi. As I mentioned, Rangitīkei, Ruapehu, South Taranaki and Whanganui. And it's our kaupapa around the impact collective that we're doing up here or down here, depending on where you are in the country. Ko te mata te maunga, ko mōhaka te awa, ko impact strategist te mahi, ko Steve Carey taka and thanks for taking the time to listen to my kōrero today. So we'll just run through the slideshow. So really, here we go. What this is all about is bringing together a number of the organisations, iwi, the community on a journey that we're going through here. So articulating what we're doing in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, the Treasury's Living Standard Framework and a Whanau Ora framework. So I'll walk you through this today. So the Impact Collective is based in the wider Whanganui Roi. It's a collaboration between the areas of Rangitīkei, Ruapehu, South Taranaki and Whanganui. Early iterations were formed in the immediate aftermath of the first COVID-19 level 4 lockdown. So we've just experienced our second one, but initially what happened was we formed an emergency response team to the first pandemic level 4 lockdown. And excuse me. And that included the likes of the District Councils, Civil Defence and DHB, iwi, our healthcare providers out in the Roi, working together and being able to talk one-on-one across the table, which our community got the benefits of. So the current Impact Collective started with that first iteration and moved through where the questions were, well, why can't we continue this? It's always been as a result of an emergency, we would come together and then at the end of it, we all go back to our business as usual. But the question was posed, well, why? Why do we need to do that? So the current membership of the Impact Collective comprises of some iwi around here, so Ngā Waiariki Ngāti Apa and Ngā Rauru Kia Tahi, for example, our local councils, being South Taranaki, Ruapehu and Rangitīkei are on board, the Whanganui District Health Board, Police, Ministry of Social Development and Te Puna Kōkiri. The Roi covers the area from the Pātea River in the west, Bulls in the south, Taihape in the east, and up along the Rangitīkei River, up into Taumaranui in the north. So what is it that we're doing? So the kaupapa is around nurturing a regenerative economy within a thriving community that creates well-being for all our people, our whenua and the planet. So this will be achieved by breaking down organisational and territorial boundaries and focusing on our communities holistically. So taking on economic, social and environmental determinants. As mentioned, where are we located and who is this about? So it was agreed by the organisations that the organisational and territorial boundaries were required to be removed in order to work for the communities that we serve. So in essence, creating the series of porous boundaries which enables communities to participate should they align to the purpose of the Impact Collective, if they tūranga waiwai here, or they are tangata whenua. So the first iteration of this is when we started looking at the statistics and the stories that were coming out of the level 4 lockdown and how people were coping. So when we went out, we undertook about 150 different focus groups across the rohi, and there was a number of consistent themes that came out of this. The first one was that we needed to work in an integrated manner for the betterment of our communities. No longer did our communities want to see us working in organisational silos. They didn't want to see the wellbeing just being dealt with by MSD. They didn't just want the iwi response to be about iwi. It had to be about the community. Everybody was looking at it from how do we encourage wellbeing and equity for our entire community. They wanted services that were designed through co-design. There was a number of ways that this was expressed, but the PC version of this was stop doing it to us and work with us. There were some less than PC versions of that, but essentially the community was starting to say things along the lines of agencies continue to develop services without us, trying to utilize anecdotal evidence to support the reason why they are delivering a service. that to them wasn't good enough. Without that participation from a community and the realization of their needs, it was very hard for the community to get in behind some of these services. Listen first and then take action. A number of our organisations are really good at jumping to an action phase without first listening. So it was really important to the community that we took a step back and started talking to them to find out what are their needs. Let's go beyond the data. Let's go beyond what our data is showing us and actually going out there and saying, what is your lived experience of some of these things? So for us, it was that opportunity to take that step back, listen to what they were saying about these things, and then start coming up with a profile with them and in conjunction with them through co-design to then take action. It was no longer about just looking at health in isolation. It was about what is well-being. We needed to take that holistically. We needed to look at a Whanau Ora approach, which was around focusing on not only the social elements of the individual and the complexities of being in a community, but also what are the impacts environmentally and economically. So rather than doing this on our own, we weren't really keen to reinvent wheels. We started looking out globally in the first instance, to start looking at, are there frameworks that have been developed? We all know that the best way to get in behind things is to set some goals. So we started looking. The first thing that we came across, of course, was the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The second thing that we started looking at was Wales Future Generations Wellbeing Act, the only Act of Parliament in the world where we can start looking at every other Act of Parliament thereafter must go along and show and demonstrate how it's going to improve the wellbeing of their communities. And then starting to look at the OECD's Better Life Index. From a national and regional perspective, we started to go, well, if there is that framework, that's great from a global perspective. A lot of the feedback that we got was a global framework is fantastic, but how does that align nationally? So then we started to look at Treasury's Living Standards framework. We started going, well, what does that look like? It starts influencing what they're doing in the wellbeing budgets, the consecutive wellbeing budgets. Then we went one step further and said, well, what's happened regionally? So we started looking at the three that we came across, which was one was the Southern Initiative. The next one was the Waikato Wellbeing Project, and closer to home was the Ruapehuano Transformation Project. One of the things that the Ruapehuano Transformation Project showed us was that it was really important to not only take the statistics side of things, but also the stories that were in behind that. So that's where we came out with, was that the stats and the stories need to be presented at all times, hand in hand together. So it takes us back to where we are now. At this current point in time, we're building the dashboards. We've been lucky enough to partner up with Loves Data, a company based down in Wellington, to start looking at and building a Power BI dashboard. And that's what I'll show you over these next couple of slides. So this here is one of the landing sites that you get to when you enter into our dashboard. You'll be able to take a look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the Treasury's Living Standards Framework, or the Whanau Ora Outcomes Framework. Once you click on these, for example, if we clicked on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, it would go to a goal-based profile. All of these statistics aren't live, it's just a demonstration, but as you can see, we can tell how we've been going and matching against the last quarter for all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This is the overview. Look, if you click on the strengths and opportunities, it will then present what is the highest strength and what is the highest opportunity in terms of the way that the data is presented, that we're able to go along and have a look at each of these. The indicators in the background of the data feed here, not only do we have the entire list of indicators which were provided alongside the 17 SDGs to look at, but we took the opportunity to start localizing some of these. For example, with end poverty, the end poverty list of what is poverty level under the SDGs wasn't really comparative to New Zealand, so we had to regionalize that. So in terms of what we were looking at a New Zealand profile, we started saying, well, we need to be looking at the 2/3 of median annual income, which was New Zealand's definition of poverty. Sorry, if you clicked on the end poverty box, it'll then take you to a higher level view of that, where the strengths and opportunities are matched against national indexing. You have a heat map in the side, as well as a score over time, and then presented alongside which of the Whanau Ora outcomes domains in the Living Standard Framework's capital is it most closely associated to. If you click on the expand indicators, it takes you to that next step. Again, you can match it against national average, and we can also select this by ethnicity. So really quick, sorry, 10 slides, 10 minutes, but that's our journey to date with the Impact Collective. We're out in the Ro'i collecting the community stories to sit these alongside the statistics. So once we have a better, higher level overview coming out of the dashboards, we'll be able to go and start those conversations with the communities around, is this your lived experience of these? And then be able to present them side by side when we start having the conversations with the membership, which are the councils and Crown agencies and iwi around now how can we best support our communities to start enhancing some of their strengths or start looking at what they can do with some of these areas of opportunities.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Really appreciate that, and what a very thoughtful process you've gone through to develop up those indicators and make them relevant to your community. So welcome questions or conversation. Please just chime in. We've got a bit of time now between now and 1 o'clock, so you're welcome to ask questions of either our speakers, or just have a reflection of what you've heard and see what it might spark. Any thoughts or questions?
Hi, Gretchen speaking. I'll just put my camera on. I come at things from kind of an odd perspective, I guess, being in social work and anthropology. But some of the key things that are interest to me in my work relates to family structure and family caregiving and what that looks like in terms of outcomes for families. So it comes from sort of the lived experience for the family and what's happening in the cultural and environmental context that undermines that. So I'm just wondering, and this could be a question to either Steve or Keith, in terms of your experience, when you're looking at sort of anthropological experience of what people are dealing with and being confronted with, how do you feel like the family experience gets heard or understood in terms of cultural shifts that are required because of colonization or climate change or these governmental structures and decisions? No small question, sorry.
I'm happy to have a crack at that one. So it's not for us to start going into those, to be fair, Gretchen. What we're starting to do with our families is, if we take it at a Whanau Ora perspective, the importance of understanding their narrative, their lived experiences, is through having those conversations with the family. What we've found is, and that's exactly why we're doing it this way, is if we present just the statistics in its own, it doesn't provide that whole picture. It just provides a single data set without going out to those communities and say, hey, we're starting to look at justice, for example, and we notice that there's a huge crime rate in this area. Is this your lived experience of it? Some of them are going to go, no, don't know what you're talking about. And it's about teasing that out and starting to go, well, what are some of the things that we can be doing to understand what's actually happening here? Now, it'll either be something's not right in the data, which it could be, or it could be that we need to tease out, well, what does those impacts of crime have on your community, so that they're able to talk about it exactly as you've said, which is around what is their experience of it.
Okay, Ray, you have a question. You have your hand up.
So really interested in your dashboard. To what extent would that same platform be able to be used elsewhere and feed other local data in? So I guess we've got something consistent as well as localizable.
It's certainly something that we're having a conversation with the DOT team. At this current point in time, we have a rohi that we're focusing in on, and that's because we had the relationships that we were able to leverage against in order to be able to make this work. 9/10 of any of this journey will always be about the relationships, not only the relationships between agencies, but also the relationship between the people that are looking at the stats and the community. So for us, what we're starting to think about is, if this is to go further and wider, what are the relationships that would need to be in place? Because some of the data feeds that come into this, most of it's national data sets that we've been able to call in on, but once we start going from the global perspective down to the national perspective and then into the local, which is Whanau Ora, a lot of the Whanau Ora inputs are going to be local data sets that we're going to have to start those conversations with the providers in order to get that anonymized feed and to be able to support the presentation of that data.
Okay. Could you possibly put some links in the chat? Because I can't, from the info on your presentation, I can't find the stuff online.
Okay, no dramas.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you for that. And Miranda, you have a question.
Yeah, kia ora everyone. So this is for Steve. If you're gathering data, but then you're also gathering information about lived experiences, as you were discussing, how then is success or opportunity measured? You know, the SDGs have all these points for measuring whether an SDG has been achieved or not. If you're using information that is a little less quantifiable, how do you measure that, or is it even necessary? It's not. This isn't a pick at you. This is because I'm really interested in this measurement of well-being.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. For us, it's come down to the importance of you can't have one without the other. So to us, it may be that everybody's experience and lived experience of these particular things will be different. It only becomes an issue if we assume that it's a problem. So actually the assumption is not ours to give. So what we need to do is work with those communities. Once we have started seeing from the statistical dashboard perspective, which you're talking about the strengths and opportunities, is starting to work with them and say, is this a strength you want to work on? This is what the data is showing us. We want to be able to work with you to understand this further and your lived experience of it, and then be able to work with them and support them around, is this something that you're wanting to focus in on, or what of these is your highest priority as a community? Gotcha. And then working with them in that.
That's kind of relates to how you said about the definition of poverty in New Zealand being different to what it may be in another country in the world. Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks very much. That was very helpful.
No worries.
I think there's an assumption there about people knowing, communities knowing, etc. I think that is a major hurdle, just as it is for aid agencies and whatever social work agencies, whatever sort of agents it is. Consulting people often doesn't result in much because of the knowledge barrier, if you like.
Sure. We've just got time for one or two more questions. We have a question here around open data. And clearly, I think, Steve, that's the aim of your work. You're trying to capture a lot of data and make it publicly available. But it was really, how does this relate to the government's agenda of more open data? And then Mariah's put a link into the chat at the bottom, open data character.net. So I don't know if you've thought about the openness of the data in relation to your community.
The interesting aspect that we've come across is that because a lot of these national data sets are able to be filtered and people are able to go along and develop and utilize a lot of this national data set, I came across something on LinkedIn the other day, which I took away from actually, which was you can have a whole heap of information and data, but it's like a scattered up pile of Lego. It's not until you take that process and you start collating it, curating it and presenting it, that it goes from information to intelligence. The purpose behind this is not about sharing more data because it gets to a point where people are just bombarded with a whole heap of data that they can't make utilization of. It's transitioning that data from information to intelligence. And the only way we're going to get the intelligence is to not only curate the data, but work with our communities on understanding what that actually means.
And that's the power of storytelling, isn't it? And that's
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Stats New Zealand did the presentation this morning and talked about obviously the data they were collecting, but then what does that mean to people? How do you make that real for people? Can they see themselves in the data? Kia ora, great. Well, thank you very much, both Keith and Steve, for your presentations. Really appreciate that. Oh, one last comment, says Steve. Data has to be valuable to communities. That's true. Yes, you've got to be capturing something that's useful and meaningful and relevant. So thank you for that. We've got a very short break now between now and the 1 o'clock session starting. So in this room, we have foreseeable future seamless integration of data to enhance climate and disaster risk reduction. So that's the next session. So you're welcome to stay in this room or find some time now to go to the other rooms and lovely to see you all, and please enjoy the rest of the evening, the afternoon. All the best.